All right. Thank you, Marcus, and thank you, everyone. Welcome to the November 5th, 2020 Indian Point Community Advisory Panel. First, I'm going to start with Supervisor Puglisi. You mentioned the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could lead us in that, please.
Everybody rise, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation,
nation, under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty
and
and justice for all.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor. You know what? I know we haven't had a meeting in a while because of the pandemic, and I had been waiting for our lives to go back to some form of normalcy, but that's not looking like that's happening anytime soon. And Supervisor Puglisi and I felt that it was necessary to start the meetings again with a Zoom meeting, which is not the best way to have a meeting. I just don't feel that you get the same energy in the room and the same back and forth conversations, and but it's important that we meet. And the Entergy representatives were kind enough to agree to do this for this evening for us and to give us an update of where things are. So thank you, Tony Vitale and Mike Toomey. Thank you for being here this evening. And as we all know, the Community Advisory Panel is established to enhance open communication, public involvement, and education on Indian Point decommissioning issues. So that's what we are going to do this evening. And now I am going to turn it over to Supervisor Puglisi.
Thank you so much, Mayor. First of all, for chairing this important panel and coordinating the meeting today. Zoom is difficult, but at least we're going to be able to get our thoughts and points across tonight. It's been a while, as Teresa said, due to the pandemic, but we have to go forward and we have to disseminate information to our community, and that's what we're all going to be doing this evening. We have an excellent panel, and we've all been on a long journey together for the last 3.5 years since the announcement of the closure of the Indian Point nuclear plants. Indian Point 1 has been closed for decades. Indian Point 2, the second reactor, closed April 2020. And then you probably all know that the last one, the third one, will close this coming April in 2021. So during the course of this journey together, we've had a local task force, Teresa and I and Joe Hawkrider, superintendent of Hendrick-Hudson School District, chaired it with many wonderful members of the community, good cross-section of the community, all volunteers, by the way. We thank them, applaud them. And so we met monthly, if not more often, for the last 2.5, 3 years. And it was a research paper for all of us, of course. You know, what happens when the nuclear plants close? How long does it take to do the reclamation of the 240 acres, the dismantling of the reactors? And what are we going to do about the jobs that are going to be lost and the lost revenue? So we have been on this research paper journey together. We have accrued a lot of information. We've gone to meetings in Albany, the county, all over, and with the community to tell them what we've learned, what we know, and to hear the input from the community. And the local task force that started up right away early February after the announcement in January 3.5 years ago, was comprised of about 20 excellent representatives of the community, from the local library to the Riverbank Fire District, realtors, our chamber, businesses, elected officials from all levels, and the like. And we just had a really good group. And then we had, local homeowner association representation. And I'm pleased to say that, Teresa, in the coordination of this panel, you've assimilated some of the people in our local task force into this panel. So we thank them for participating. Of course, we had labor representation. I see Tommy Carey here from labor and others, and they've been a part of it. We've had guest speakers. We've had our county executive, George Latimer, has attended meetings. He's here this evening. Our state assemblywoman, Sandy Galiff, our state senator, Peter Harkin, county legislators, and they've all participated as well. But we've had my point that I'm trying to make to everybody who's listening is that we have had a core group of people at the local level, because we work here, we live here, we raise our children here, and we are the ones that are mostly affected by the closure of Indian Point. So this panel now, as we go forward, will have the responsibility at the local level to learn about the dismantling, review it, monitor it, oversight, whichever word you want to use. We're going to do it. And we are going to work hard to get that information out to our families, to our residents in our areas, because with all due respect to our officials in Albany, it's difficult for our citizens to go up to Albany to get the information. They need to get it from us here at the local level. So Teresa and I feel strongly about that, as our board members do as well. As I said, we're the local officials that the residents look to for the information, for the answers to their questions. They can email us, text us, call us, stop in. It's tough for them to drive up to Albany, especially now during this pandemic. So the point that we're going to be making tonight, as we have before, is that this local community advisory panel, as we go forward into the next stage of the dismantling, decommissioning, is imperative that it's at the local level. So, thank you, Mayor. Somebody's phone is ringing. It's not mine.
Not mine. All right.
So thank you, Mayor Knickerbocker and board members. It's a wonderful partnership that we have. I look forward to continuing our excellent work together for and with our residents and our families. So thank you all.
Thank you, Supervisor Puglisi. As always, you're all about the community. So we appreciate that. And thank you for doing the overview of where we were and where we are now. So
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right now, I'd like to do the introduction of the panel members, and I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do this in an orderly manner. So what I thought, and please tell me if you feel the same way, if everyone could just hit the raised hand, and then I can let you know it's your turn to go. How's that sound? Does that sound like organized or what?
It's terrific.
Hit the chat. Either that or the chat. Just put your name up. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Marcus, are you seeing anybody so far? That might not be.
No. The raised hand icon.
Yeah, so I see Deb's got her hand up.
So I guess, Teresa, you're asking us to raise our hands if we want to introduce ourselves. So I guess I'll
Please,
start it
thank you,
off and
Deb.
say I'm Deb
Thank
Malone,
you. I
president of
wasn't
Hudson
clear
Valley.
enough.
There you go.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So thank you, Deb. And Deb, since you clarified that, you can go first.
I'm Deb Malone, president of the Hudson Valley Gateway Chamber of Commerce. And
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to be here this evening.
Okay, we're happy to have you. George Latimer.
Thanks very much, George Latimer, County Executive. I'm joined by Susan Spear, Ellen Hendricks, and Pete Lauren from our executive team. And in a few seconds, the county legislators, Catherine Borgia and Colin Smith, are both here. The county, as the next level up from the town, takes this very seriously. This is an important issue for the county. We, as I've said every time before, we want to be a good partner to the village and to the town on these issues. And we'll help try to figure out what strategies to influence Albany where we can, and then to do the unilateral things that we can do with the county.
Thank you for your support, George.
Thank you, George.
Rich Becker.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rich Becker. I'm Councilman and Deputy Supervisor, Town of Cortland. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And I think we've learned over the summer via Port Cortland that many opportunities are going to come for our community. And some of them could be quite lucrative, but still not right. So we have to work together and decide what is right, what is the proper fit. And that's going to be a collaborative decision. And happy to work with all of you so that we can move on and resolve all the upcoming issues that we have to deal with. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Sandy Galiff. How about Sandy Galiff?
Hi, I'm here to join you all. Sandy Galiff, New York State Assemblywoman. And I guess we'll get later to some of the legislation that we have still pending up in Albany that we want the governor to sign. So we'll talk about that later, right, Teresa?
Yeah, we'll have
Okay.
time to do some more comments, but yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Yeah, we'd like to hear that. Nick.
Thank you. Nick Longo, representing Rockland County and County Executive Ed Day. Very appreciative to be part of this panel to share ideas and thoughts on the impending closure of Indian Point. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Knickerbocker and Supervisor Puglisi for putting this forum together, and the man behind the curtain, Marcus, for doing the controls and everything. And a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, Nick. Let's see, John O'Mara. Oh, you're muted,
Hey,
John.
there we go.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry about that. I'm still a slide rule type of guy. I'm retired regional spill engineer for the New York State DEC Region 3. My background is chemical engineering, many degrees, many years. I'm here to assist, and I'm not even sure how I can assist yet, but Mayor Knickerbocker asked me to be on a thing, so I'm here.
Thank you. We appreciate it. You'll be of great assistance. Tom Cogden.
Hi, I'm Tom Condon. I'm the Executive Deputy at the Department of Public Service and the Chair of the Indian Point Closure Task Force. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Speaking from the state of New York, we're here to assist the town, the village, and the county in transitioning to a future with a closed Indian Point. And we've been working collaboratively with all of you for the last few years, and we really appreciate the collaborative relationship we have formed, and I think we've made a great deal of progress, and I'll speak to some of the efforts underway later in the agenda. So thank you all very much.
All right, thanks for being here, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Let's start up at the top. William Smith. Oh, hi.
Good evening. I'm here. How you doing? I'm William Smith. I'm the Vice President of the Utility Workers Union, Local 1-2. I represent the utility workers at the plant, and I look forward to working with the panel. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Let's see, Catherine Borgia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Borgia, one of the county legislators that represents the area immediately surrounding the plant. My colleague Colin Smith actually represents the land that the plant is on. This is obviously, as the county executive said, very important to us at the county level, and very personal to Colin and me as two county legislators who represent the immediate surrounding communities. I am also a Cortland resident, so looking forward to continuing this good collaboration. Thank you to the mayor and the supervisor for convening this group.
All right, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
Let's see, how about Mike Toomey?
Good
Good evening. I'm Mike Toomey, Entergy's Senior Vice President of Federal Policy, Regulatory, and Government Affairs. And I'm here representing the company's interests on this panel. And we appreciate the ability to be involved in this important community platform.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for your participation. Tony Vitale?
Good evening. I'm Tony Vitale. I'm the Site Vice President, excuse me, at Indian Point. I'm a product of School District 3, and I'm responsible for providing you safe, clean, and reliable electricity. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Al Liberatore?
I'm business agent for Teamsters Local 456. We represent approximately 170 members at Indian Point.
Thank you, Al. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be
Joe
here,
Lynch.
by the way.
Thank you. Joseph Lynch.
Thank you, Chairperson Knickerbocker. My name is Joe Lynch. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for our decommissioning plants, and I'll be the presenter tonight representing Entergy.
Thank you. Eileen Absinger.
Eileen Absinger. I am a resident of the Village of Buchanan, and I'm glad to be here tonight.
And please, I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. I don't do it intentionally.
All right, Teresa.
Sorry.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mayor, for putting this together, you and Supervisor Puglisi. I thank all my friends in labor that are here tonight, and my good friend Tony Vitale, another product of District 3. And I want to congratulate our newly re-elected Assembly people, Kevin Byrne and Sandy Galiff. Congratulations. And I'm just happy to be on the panel and help out any manner I can. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you for the remembering. I was going to mention it towards the end, but thank you, Tom, for the congratulations to our newly elected. Manna Jo Green.
Thank you, Mayor Knickerbocker. Manna Jo Green, I'm the Environmental Director for Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, and I moonlight as an Ulster County legislator, so I have a little bit of a sense of how things work in government. And I have two announcements, but I'll wait to that are educational events that are coming up that I think would be of interest to the panel, but I'll wait till later in the discussion to make those.
Okay, thank you, Manna. Let's see, John Sipos.
Hello, good evening, everyone. This is John Sipos. Nice to see everyone virtually up from DPS here in Albany, and I'm looking forward to tonight's meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Don Dwyer.
Good evening, everyone. Congratulations, Sandy and Kevin. Great job. I am a local realtor, a parent of a Hen Hut student, a taxpayer, and resident of Montrose. I'm very happy to be here.
All right, thank you, Don. Joe Hawkrider.
Hi, everyone. Joe Hawkrider, Superintendent of Hendrick Hudson School District, formerly known as District 3, and very happy and honored that the school district has a seat at this table for this very important work. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe. Kevin Byrne.
Hi, everybody. Kevin Byrne. I'm actually kind of dual tasking here with some new dad responsibilities because the wife is back to work doing the overnight. But I represent the Assembly District, Westchester and Putnam counties. Honored to be here. Been able to listen in on the Indian Point Closure Task Force's work for the last year or so throughout this whole ordeal. I'm just honored to be a part of it. So thank you. I'll probably have the avatar on, but I am listening. I just don't think you want to see the little guys squealing. So thanks.
We do want to see them. We want to see them.
I'll give you a shot later, okay?
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Richard Baroni. He's on mute. We'll wait till he comes off mute. Okay, we'll go back to him. I'm just checking to see if I've gotten everyone. Let me just I think Colin Smith is also on.
You know, Teresa, I'm sorry. He was having some technical difficulties,
Okay.
but he jumped back off and is coming back.
Okay, all right. Yeah, he can catch back up with us. Now, everyone that's on now, have you introduced yourself? I think so. I think we've gotten everyone. Okay, so we're going to move on to the agenda of approval of minutes of the January 15th, 2020 meeting. Everyone has gotten a copy of the minutes? Nana?
Yeah, it's a very minor thing, but I just want to point out that my name is spelled two different ways. It does have an E at the end of Green. And so it's a minor
it's right on the screen. Tonight it's right on the screen.
Yes.
Okay.
It is.
Okay. All right. Oh, no, we want to have that correct for the record, for sure.
And then there were a couple things as I was reading through the minutes that I'll bring up in the discussion, things that we said would get addressed, but I don't think have. And, you know, COVID may be one reason, but the minutes are correct from my perspective as written.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Teresa?
Yes.
It's Linda. Yeah, I just see coming up on my screen that Tom Congdon is not visible. We could hear him, but he doesn't have his picture up, nor does John Sipos. So I don't know if they can put up their photos or themselves.
I'm here. I'll see if I've got a photo, but I don't have a video. So
okay.
I'm fully participating, and I'll be presenting in a moment a quick presentation from the state side.
Yeah, no problem. I just had an email to me asking if you could do that because people want to see you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we do have a quorum this evening. So on a motion to approve the minutes for January 15, 2020.
I'll make a motion, Teresa.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes approved. The only other next thing we have before we get to Tom Congdon is approval of the revised charter, of a revised charter. So we're increasing the members of the CAP from 26 to 29. We're adding the assembly member for the 94th district, Kevin Byrne. And also we're adding the county legislator for the 9th district, Catherine Borgia. The supervisor and I felt that they have both been active participants since the formation of the CAP, and the Indian Point site affects their constituents also, and they expressed an interest to being part of our panel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the only other thing, and I guess we're not doing it this evening, but something to think about is adding another member of the scientific or environment or somebody with an environmental expertise. We will be taking resumes, and the supervisor and I will talk over that and choose someone by the next meeting. So if anyone knows of someone that might be interested in being on our panel that either has a scientific or environmental background, you can send that to Marcus, our village administrator, their resumes, and we will, at the next meeting, we will be looking at that. The other thing is the retention of the records. This was an error in our original charter. So the retention of the records by the CAP secretary, which is Judy Peterson, who's doing a phenomenal job. Thank you so much, Judy. I know it's not easy, these meetings, to compile all the information, but we appreciate the work you've done, please. It's a lot of work.
I echo that. She does a great job.
Yes. So retention of records by the CAP secretary rather than the Indian Point owner. So that was an error that was originally made in our original charter. And we are officially, the third point is officially naming our website. It's www.indianpointcap.com. So You will be able to see information, minutes of the meetings, et cetera, on our website. That will be the official, like I said. So, any questions or comments on that before I put it up for a motion?
No,
We're
sounds
good?
Sounds
Okay.
good.
On a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right. And in case I haven't mentioned it, I don't know if I mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting. I think the last meeting I didn't. My name is Teresa Knickerbocker. I'm the mayor of the Village of Buchanan, and I'm also the chairwoman of this Indian Point Citizens Advisory, Community Advisory Panel.
Teresa, everybody knows you.
They do, yeah.
They
Okay.
do.
They've seen me before at these meetings. They've seen me.
Teresa, I just want to make one comment, if I may.
Sure,
Excuse
absolutely.
me. Our homeowners group is called Power Through Cortland.
Oh, yes.
And I forgot to mention the name of the group. They're terrific. So thank you to all of them.
I think Don is doubling tonight as, I know Mark Goodnow was not available. We had gotten an email today. So Don is gonna do double duty here this evening.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Don.
you.
And you know what, I think before we start with Tom Congdon, we have Colin Smith here also. Hi, Colin, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I was trying to join earlier, but I was using the wrong link. Marcus did send me the correct one. I just was using the incorrect one. So I'm here. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm listening.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, on the agenda, we're moving up to the, onto the update from New York State Department of Public Service. Tom Congdon would like to give us an update. So Tom?
Hi, Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me at your task force meeting. Since the state's task force met last, we did file our annual report from the state closure task force, which all of the members had received. It is available on our website. For those of you who haven't seen it, www.dps.ny.gov. That provides an overview of all of the areas the task force has been working on, from the work that our State Department of Labor has been doing with the employees affected by the plant's closure in terms of meeting one-on-one and developing individualized work plans for possible future employment and other needs, training needs, etc., to the work that we have been doing with all of you on other economic development opportunities. They're summarized in the report. Most notably, I think the thing that our folks on the state task force track closely is the state cessation program. And this is the program at the state level under state law that provides financial assistance to taxing jurisdictions that are affected by reduction in property taxes paid when power plants close. And of course, that's a major issue with respect to the closure of Indian Point and the phase down of the pilot payments that are made to the county, town, village, school district, Verplank Fire District, and the library. So with that, there has been a very big focus by our task force on the availability of funds and to ensure that program would be available to the Indian Point communities when they become eligible. And our state legislators have been terrific each year in getting funding appropriated to the program. But an issue that the state task force repeatedly raised was whether there would be enough certainty about funding for the 7-year period of financial assistance that the program allows for. And so in part because of the task force's advocacy, as well as a need for addressing the long-term financial stability of this cessation program for the rest of the state, we developed a proposal to amend the state energy plan to reflect the importance of this program and to reflect the importance of having a new funding source that is a stable, recurring funding source. That state energy plan amendment was adopted in the spring of this year, and when it was proposed as draft, many of you filed comments in support of that, and that was really helpful to the State Energy Planning Board to see, the strong interest locally in ensuring such a program had a funding mechanism. Now we're doing the next step. The State Energy Plan identified the problem and said that the State Public Service Commission, that's the agency I work for, and in its oversight of utilities, should establish that funding mechanism through our powers in terms of our oversight of the utilities. Through our powers of regulating the utilities, we've established a number of public benefit funds for the clean energy programs that are administered by NYSERDA, for example. And this direction by the State Energy Planning Board was, in effect, telling the Public Service Commission is the state policy to have the PSC identify the appropriate funding mechanisms for this other public benefit program, this one administered by Empire State Development Agency. So we, following that direction from the State Energy Planning Board, commenced a proceeding a couple of months ago to establish the funding mechanism. That's the next step in the process. And we are right now collecting public comments on our piece of this initiative. And so this is really a public service announcement to all of you that we are accepting public comments on the proposal to use the PSC's authority over utilities to establish a stable, recurring funding mechanism that will put to rest forever the concerns of annual state appropriations for the program, but instead have the program have a stable source of funding that can be reviewed annually based on need and established, again, through the PSC's oversight of the utilities. So our public comment period is running through December 5th, and I encourage all of you to visit our website, again, www.bps.ny.gov, and find the Indian Point comment opportunity. We will also send our proceeding information to the town and to the village so that you may post this on your websites so your constituents can find opportunities to weigh in. And again, we'd really appreciate hearing from all of you. So that's my report from the state side. Mayor, thank you again for having us.
Thank you so
Mayor,
much.
could I ask a couple questions of Tom?
Sure, absolutely.
Tom, first of all, thanks for being here, and thank you to your colleagues for working with us on the state task force. It's been helpful. And just for the public's edification, if they really don't understand or know what the cessation fund is and how many other types of communities can tap into the funds that are in it, if you could just explain that for everybody, please.
Sure. So the way the program works is if a power plant closes in a community, and as a result of the closure, the tax payments paid by that facility are reduced by 20% or more, that community is eligible to apply to the ESD, Empire State Development, for this financial assistance. And in the first year of their tax loss, they can become eligible after they show the loss occurred to receive 7 years of declining grant assistance. starting at 80% of the loss and reducing each year by 10%. So it starts 80% of the loss, then the next year 70%, 60%, and so on. And the idea is that over those 7 years, this is funding that helps to take out the immediacy of the tax loss and allows the community's tax base to adjust to the new tax revenue situation. Ideally, during that time, there are other economic development opportunities and new taxpayers added to the rolls that help to offset the loss. But in any event, this is the state program to help ease the transition from such large taxpayers coming off the rolls.
Thank you, Tom. And also, it's not just for a community that has closing of nuclear plants. It could be a coal plant or a natural gas plant, hydro as well, correct?
That's correct.
And how many communities are now tapping into this fund?
I believe it's the same number. There are 5 taxing jurisdictions affected by 2 power plant closures.
Mm-hmm. And my last question, although I have many, but I won't belabor my questions, I promise. I realize you're working on establishing additional funding or a mechanism as we go forward, but can you tell us all, how much is in this cessation fund as we speak?
Approximately 30 million or so. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but approximately 30 million from the original 69 million authorization through the various acts of the legislature and the governor through the budget process is still available.
Okay, I mean, just for the public's information, there are other communities throughout the state that have closures of energy plants. So it's not just for us, unfortunately, even though we would like it to be just for us. They're working on other mechanisms for adding to that fund. But when you consider the school district will be losing close to, $24 million a year in revenue, right, Joe? Joe Hawkrider?
I was muted. I'm sorry. Yes, and we've been in regular contact with Tom and his office.
I know you have. I just, it's not the end all. That's what I'm trying to say. Every bit will help you and us. That's my line of questioning, Teresa. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Linda. Okay, and I just want to mention a few other people. Dennis Malice has come on from the Montrose Business Association. I understand Jerry Shapiro is on also from Kristen Gillibrand's office. Pat Keenan is on from Nita Lowy's office, and Lisa Hofflick from Kristen Gillibrand's. If I missed anyone, please, put that in the chat box and I will bring that up. Okay, I think we're ready now for the presentation from Entergy. And Joe Lynch, Director of Government and External Affairs. Joe, it's your turn.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Knickerbocker. I'll just wait a second for Marcus. Thank you. First, I just want to thank all the panel members and the leadership on the panel for this opportunity to give you an update on where we stand relative to our transition to decommissioning at Indian Point. Next slide, please. In just the way of introductions, I am the Director of Government Affairs for our decommissioning sites. Just celebrated 13 years with Entergy and 39 years in the nuclear industry in various capacities. Indian Point is actually the 6th plant that I've been working on relative to either transitioning to decommissioning or actually worked physical decommissioning. I also spent a lot of time operating these plants. Prior to Indian Point, I did spend some time at our Vermont Yankee plant and our Pilgrim plant in Massachusetts, transitioning them from operating plants to decommissioning. And in a prior life, I also worked as a decommissioning manager at Connecticut Yankee and the site closure director at Yankee Row in Massachusetts, 2 major decommissioning projects in the northeast part of the United States. Next slide, please. So as mentioned earlier by Supervisor Puglisi, we absolutely did shut down Indian Point Unit 2 back on April 30th of this year as we had planned. Indian Point Unit 3's last refueling outage was in the spring of last year, and Unit 3 will be permanently shutting down no later than April 30th of next year, 2021. Under Tony Vitality's leadership, the team is focused on safe, reliable operations of Unit 3 through shutdown, while in conjunction we're preparing Unit 2 for decommissioning. Indian Point does remain the subject of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's oversight and regulation through what is known as the Reactor Oversight Program. And once Unit 3 shuts down, the NRC will indeed have a role in overseeing decommissioning, but the site will transition to what is known as the Decommissioning Inspection Program rather than the Reactor Oversight Program. Some of you may have participated virtually on September 22nd of this year. It was that evening that the NRC held a virtual end-of-cycle public meeting to discuss Indian Point's operational performance in 2019, and as well talk a little bit about the transition to decommissioning. During that meeting, the NRC stated that Indian Point Units 2 and 3 operated safely in a manner that preserved the public health and safety and preserved the environment, and that certainly is high marks for the site. Next slide, please. So after Indian Point Unit 3 ultimately shuts down next year, the next milestone would be to transfer the fuel from the reactor to the spent fuel pool. Once we've reached that milestone, Entergy will then notify the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that the site has been permanently defueled and has also permanently ceased power operations. That's a significant milestone because in essence, we're turning in our operating license at that point. And in order for the site to operate in the future, we would have to go through the licensing process all over again and meet the current standards. Upon permanent defuel, the site will implement changes to the emergency plan. That first change is known as the post-shutdown emergency plan. It will look very much like the emergency plan that we have right now with multiple teams on 7-day, 24-hour-a-day shifts overseeing the emergency plan. The big change here is that with the plant no longer operating, the emergency plan really will focus on the safe storage of the fuel. So the type of events that would have been in the previous emergency plan having to do with plant operations would be different. So the changes to the emergency plan would reflect those changes. That will also be the first staff reduction that we'll see at the site. Following a period of time for the fuel to cool in the spent fuel pool, the site will then go through a second change to the emergency plan. That's known as the permanently defueled emergency plan. That is yet to be approved by the NRC, and that will be some months out into the future. And again, that milestone will further reduce the amount of staff that we need for the emergency plan, but it will still be a complete and robust emergency plan, again, focusing on the storage of fuel. During these post-shutdown emergency plan periods, we will be going through the process of transferring the spent nuclear fuel from the pool to the independent spent fuel storage installation, or ISFSI, and that will be occurring until all fuel has been moved from the spent fuel pools to dry cask storage. Next slide, please. So in order to ensure that we're doing all the work that we need to do to get ready for decommissioning, the site has formed a dedicated decommissioning planning organization. And we also have a corporate oversight organization that essentially brings in the people that had the experience at some of our other sites to oversee what's going on at Indian Point. This group will support the readiness for decommissioning, including any key submittals to local, state, and federal authorities, as well as the NRC through changes to the operating license and then other transaction activities. Again, this team would be focused specifically on decommissioning milestones separate from the staff that will continue to safely operate IPEC Unit 3 until it's shut down. This panel, of course, becomes a very important venue for sharing information and educating the public on the decommissioning process, and Entergy will be more than happy to present into the future anytime we have a meeting to give you an update on where we stand. We've also formed a specific decommissioning website, www.indianpointdecommissioning.com. This presentation, as well as key submittals and other information, will continually be put onto that website for anybody's review and to keep up with the process of transitioning to decommissioning. Next slide, please. Part of the charter of this panel is to be given updates on the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund. The most recent combined balance of all of the Indian Point Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund was just over $2.3 billion on September 30th of this year. Just in comparison, the combined balance at the end of last year was 2.187, almost $2.2 billion. So the fund is indeed growing despite the volatility in the market. Those investments for that fund are in generally very stable investments, so you can see a small but continuous growth. We also have an obligation on an annual basis to the NRC to provide them with an update on what's in the trust funds for each of the units and in total, and we complete that every year on or about April 1st, or I should say on or no later than April 1st. And that is on the previous year's performance, so that reflects the 2.187 billion that we reported at the end of 2019. Next slide. Very important, as I mentioned earlier, through our different mechanisms, is for Entergy to continually work with and update our numerous federal, state, and local stakeholders on what's going on relative to decommissioning. We do that outreach through local meetings. One of the limitations obviously imposed by COVID-19 is that we have not been able to do face-to-face meetings since March. However, we do continue to participate in virtual meetings like this evening. We also did the chamber meeting that was mentioned earlier along with Holtec, and we'll continue to be out in the community as much as we can, or meeting with the various agencies at the state and federal level. Next slide, please. We've talked about this in the past, and I know it's extraordinarily important to the company and to Tony for all of his employees at the site. But our commitment to our employees is very, very important to us. On May 29th of this year, a short time after the shutdown of Unit 2, approximately 90 employees either transferred to new positions with Entergy or accepted voluntary separations. We did not have a planned layoff. However, we offered people opportunities to pursue other positions within Entergy, and people were also provided the opportunity to retire if it so worked for them. So that was one milestone earlier this year. That leaves us with about 770 employees. About 750 are at the site. About 20 people work out of our White Plains, New York office and support the site. As part of Entergy's ongoing commitment to its employees, the company previously announced a plan to find a position within the company for those qualified employees who are willing to relocate. We put that word out, and to date, about 150 employees have expressed an interest in transferring within the company. So that's obviously a very positive thing. Previous to the announcement for Indian Point, we had made the announcement at some of the other sites. So there's not a lot of opportunities here in the Northeast, but we do have a company with a lot of opportunities in the South, states like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas. So we're inviting people to look at opportunities across the entire Entergy sets of companies. Next slide, please. Of course, in addition to folks looking for opportunities elsewhere, we're also going to be putting together a phased approach of selecting people to remain at Indian Point after the shutdown of Unit 3 and into these various decommissioning phases as Entergy employees, or potentially to be transitioned to CDI, which I'll talk about in a second, if we have a successful transaction with Holtec in the event that that's approved. The various phases in general are driven by the emergency plan. I had mentioned earlier that we lessening the amount of employees based on how many we need for the emergency plan. Plus, we'll of course need a core group of employees to continually oversee the spent fuel pool and all of the functions that we'll need into decommissioning. The staffing of that first decommissioning phase, or what we call phase one, is ongoing and expected to be complete this quarter by the end of the year. Potentially with the exception of security, the security organization has additional time per their contract to complete the selection process, but we're working with them to ensure that all of those positions are filled by that union. And when we're all complete putting together the selection for phase one, we expect about 300 employees will be retained going forward. Next slide, please. Entergy has been working very closely with the New York State Department of Labor for the benefit of our employees. There's been numerous meetings and seminars provided different information in identifying resources to our employees. I believe it was yesterday, we had the New York State Department of Labor hosting 2 virtual workshops about conducting online job searches and the use of the New York State's Department of Labor's Job Zone tool for finding positions of similar skill sets. So that's an ongoing activity. Tony puts that information out on a regular basis, as does our HR manager, and I think it's been received very well by the employees. Entergy is also working with the U.S. Department of Labor on additional benefits that might be available as a supplement to those available here in New York or in other states that our employees live. This benefit is known as the Trade Adjustment Assistance Act. It's a federal benefit for different companies that have been shut down due potentially due to the fact that there's foreign competition that might have influenced the shutdown. We were able to get these benefits for our employees in Vermont and Massachusetts. We have filed a petition for the benefit of the employees at Indian Point, and we'll see whether or not we meet those requirements through, again, the U.S. Department of Labor. And then we do have regular all-employee meetings. They were previously held at the site. Now they're either at the site or virtually, generally hosted by Tony and his staff, to provide information to the employees about the transition to decommissioning and the future options that people have. Next slide, please. Just a brief overview on spent fuel management, obviously a very key topic going forward as we transition into decommissioning. So after shutdown, all of the nuclear fuel in the reactors will be transferred to the spent fuel pool for that initial cooling, and then ultimately moved to dry cask storage on site. The dry casks, I think, have been described in the past, are sealed metal containers with a concrete overpack around them, fully enclosed. They are a system that does not use any moving parts. They're naturally cooled, and they're a very passive device. So natural circulation cooling, they sit on the pad and are designed for many, many years of storage. We have selected a Holtec system, which is probably the system that is used by most of the plants in this country and really across the globe. As many of you know, under federal law and by contract, the U.S. Department of Energy is obligated to remove the spent nuclear fuel from Indian Point and other sites and dispose of it at a NRC licensed facility. That, of course, was going to be Yucca Mountain. But right now the focus, I think, is on interim storage. But once we do have a place to send the fuel, the U.S. Department of Energy will be obligated to move it from the site and free us of that obligation. Next slide, please. So currently there are 52 loaded casks at Indian Point. on the independent spent fuel storage installation, or ISFSI. By the end of next year, we expect to load 6 additional casks, giving us a total of 58. Currently, we have one single pad that makes up our ISFSI. It has a capacity of 75 casks, and it's located within our protected area, which is overseen by our security force. We will need a total of 125 casks to hold all the spent nuclear fuel generated during the operations of Indian Point Units 1, 2, and 3. So in order to accommodate that, we are seeking to expand the ISFSI to accommodate the required dry storage capacity to fully defuel what's left in Unit 2 and Unit 3 fuel pool. And this is a very important prerequisite to transition to decommissioning. You can't do a lot of physical decommissioning work with fuel in the pool. So the faster safely that we can get them to the pads, the better it is for starting that physical decommissioning. So a second pad with a storage capacity of approximately 55 casks is planned to be constructed adjacent to the existing pad. And right now our schedule has that completed in May of 2022. And we are in the process of seeking the required approvals to move forward with that expansion. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, Holtec International has been Entergy's spent fuel service and spent fuel storage vendor, not only here at Indian Point, but we also use them at Pilgrim, Vermont Yankee, and in the future Palisades. They provide what we call cradle-to-grave service. Not only do they manufacture the casks, but they also provide the design services and the construction services to build these dry cask storage systems at our sites. Holtec does provide 30 years of safe spent fuel management. Their cask design has not experienced any leaks or failures. They bring not only the cask design and construction, but they also build these installations. I personally was involved in the oversight at Vermont Yankee and Pilgrim, and they do an outstanding job. And they also supply spent fuel storage and transportation services to over 130 nuclear sites worldwide. So as I mentioned earlier, they have probably the largest capacity of any of the manufacturers. And the last topic I just wanted to bring everybody up to date on is what we had announced earlier. Mike Toomey had provided a presentation last year about the fact that Entergy is seeking the approval to sell Indian Point to Holtec. That started on April 16th of 2019 when Entergy and Holtec announced that they had reached an agreement pursuant to which Entergy would sell the subsidiaries that own Indian Point Units 1, 2, and 3 to a Holtec subsidiary for the purpose of them starting decommissioning. If that was approved, that would become effective after Unit 3 had been shut down next year, as well as permanently defueled. And it would include transfer of all of the licenses, including the NRC license. It would include transfer of the spent fuel, all of the decommissioning liabilities, and of course the nuclear decommissioning trust funds for all 3 units. At this point, that transaction closing is targeted for May of next year. Next slide. This transaction is subject to a number of closing conditions and approvals. The first, of course, would be to get approval from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The NRC is targeting complete its review of the license transfer application, which was submitted last year, by the end of this year. They mentioned that at the end of cycle meeting back in September. These are always targets with the NRC. Obviously, they have a lot on their plate, so we'll see whether or not they meet that, but that is at least what we've been told most recently. The companies have also requested an order from the New York State Public Service Commission, either disclaiming jurisdiction in a role having to do with this transfer and sale, or alternatively approving the transaction. And then finally, amongst other conditions, the closing is conditioned on obtaining from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation an agreement confirming that Holtec's decommissioning plans are consistent with the applicable New York State environmental cleanup standards. And all of these are ongoing activities in this process. The benefits of the sale is that Holtec plans to initiate decommissioning at Indian Points decades sooner than if Entergy remained the owner, and if we had selected the maximum 60-year time period allowed by the NRC in what's known as the safe store option. I know Mike Toomey presented this information to you a while back, but the NRC does allow a number of options, 3 in fact. One is called decon, that would be near-term or immediate decommissioning of these nuclear power facilities. They also offer a safe store option, which allows a licensee up to 60 years to complete decommissioning. And then the last one is called entomb, which would allow even more time. However, the NRC has not approved that for any site, and I don't think they would. So given the 2 options, Holtec brings forward a plan, the expertise, and the experience to do this in a shorter period of time. I believe they're saying 12 to 15 years, which would obviously be a benefit for the site and for the area. As I mentioned earlier, CDI, or Comprehensive Decommissioning International, that is the decommissioning general contractor for the Holtec fleet, and they plan to perform the decommissioning at Indian Point. They would be the entity that would accept the Entergy employees that are selected for phase 1 to be employees of CDI. They would bring the expertise, the knowledge, the background, all the things that Holtec and CDI would need to complete a successful decommissioning going forward. A detailed timeline and cost estimate was provided in Holtec's post-shutdown decommissioning activities report, or PSDAR. That was also sent along with a site-specific decommissioning cost estimate to the NRC. That was submitted back in December of 2019. And then finally, this is kind of the projected transaction timeline if we receive the approvals. As mentioned earlier, the closure of Indian Point was announced back in January of 2017. Back in April of 2019, Entergy and Holtec announced the sale agreement. The license transfer application was filed by Holtec and Entergy to the NRC back in November of 19. Along with that, we filed the petition with the New York State Public Service Commission. Of course, Indian Point Unit 2 shut down earlier this year in April. As mentioned earlier, the current target for NRC decision on the license transfer application could be as early as the end of this year. Again, plans to shut Unit 3 down in April of 2021. And if all comes together, the target for the projected sale would be complete by May of 2021. I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Teresa, Linda, can I go?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have questions? You can go first. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right, thank you.
I will have time.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're working with the employees to help them get jobs or have good retirement plans, or to be retrained so that perhaps they could be retained by the decommissioning company. Those questions were critical for us at the beginning. Teresa remembers, right? Mm-hmm. Tommy in the labor union, certainly remembers us all asking those important questions. So Holtec is the sole company, the only company that's being considered by Entergy to the NRC for approval. Is that correct, Mr. Lynch?
That's correct.
Okay. You know, several individuals, environmental groups, state officials, local officials, we had questions about Holtec's ability to do the decommissioning, and we're hopeful that those questions will be answered. Do you have knowledge that they will be before the NRC gives their approval?
Well, I'm certainly aware there's been a lot of questions that have been posed to the NRC as part of their review process. Certain entities have filed a request to intervene in that process and seek a
Okay.
hearing before the commission. So we'll see how that all plays out. I think the experience that we had at Vermont Yankee and at Pilgrim shows that there is a process that's involved. And, I can't comment on, what the NRC will do with all of that. But certainly all of that is considered.
So I'm glad to hear that you're going to have some involvement in answering some of those questions that would be helpful to us at all levels. The jobs issues are critical. The environmental issues are also very important to us. It abuts the Hudson River, as you know, and there are 33 wells on the 240-acre campus. So we want to make sure that Entergy, before they transfer over and before they're approved, make sure that these water bodies and environmental issues are going to be addressed, and made sure that Holtec or whomever will be making sure that those critical issues are going to be part of their process.
Yes, thanks for that comment. We certainly understand that. And as I had mentioned in the presentation, one thing that's very important for this potential transaction is to work with the DEC, on the cleanup standards, and that is an ongoing activity.
Thank you so much. And then Tom Congdon certainly knows, and we all know, that there was a consultant company retained by the state. We were happy about that. DL English is the environmental consultant that was retained by the state. They developed a report, which is a public document. I'm sure you know it and you've read it. The reason I bring it up when we talk about economic growth and jobs, in that report, DL English stated that there were some corner parcels of the 240 acres that could be developed sooner rather than later. I remember asking Mr. Toomey that question about a year and a half ago, and he said that Entergy was not going to say yes to that question at that time. I was wondering if Entergy has reconsidered that, because as was stated before, we're looking for environmental growth, and those, I think it's about 60 acres altogether of the 240 acre site that the report stated upon research and assessment could be perhaps developed sooner rather than later. Teresa certainly remembers. So do you have any comments for us in that regard, on that question?
Joe, I'll take that. Thanks, Linda. We don't have a different answer at this point, okay. Linda. First of all, we have to know how the decommissioning plan is going to be done, and we won't know that until we know whether the transfer to Holtec is approved or not. And the report that you're talking about, we didn't necessarily agree with every conclusion in that report about what parts of the site might be eligible for reuse on a different timeline. But once we know whether Holtec's going to be the owner or we're going to be the owner, then we can develop an appropriate decommissioning plan if we're the owner, and we can address that question.
I will come back and ask you that question in the future.
Right, and if Holtec becomes the owner, that's a question.
I'll ask them. Okay. I'm not trying to put you on the
No, that's okay.
Seriously, but it's important to all of us. That's
it is.
For sure.
And the point is, if Holtec becomes the owner, the decommissioning is going to take place much sooner than if Entergy remains the owner. So in terms of reuse of that property, that's where the best opportunity for reuse comes from. So
I guess they're saying something like 15, 20 years instead of the 60 that the NRC allows. Is that right?
Holtec's current timeline, which is subject to further refinement based on how long the approval process takes. But I believe that their current timeline is around 15 years.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll be here then, but we'll see.
We're going to still be here, Linda. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up,
Okay,
Linda. 'cause
Teresa, thanks for letting me
important.
ask all those questions.
Thank you.
Trying to think
Yeah,
about
those
some
were
of the
good
things
questions.
the community would ask, so go ahead.
Yeah, because that's important. We've been talking about that, and that's important, of course, as we all know, for our community, for economic development, for our tax base, considering, especially the Village of Buchanan, the school, the town, we're all taking some serious hits on our revenue. So, yeah, that's going to be an ongoing discussion, but thank you for bringing that up, Linda.
Okay.
Sandy, I think Sandy had her hand raised. So what I'd like to do, so it's kind of orderly. If you have a question, hit the little hand raise thing, and then I'll recognize you, and then we can cover everybody that would like to ask a question or make a comment. Okay, Sandy.
Thanks, Teresa. Mr. Lynch, I'm sitting here and I must say I was kind of confused because you spent a lot of time in your early presentation about how you spoke about the Community Advisory Board, that you're going to share information, you're going to educate the public, you're going to do updates on the Indian Point Trust Fund, which I guess the first one would be this April. And, you spoke about the employees, but at the same time, you're saying that in May, which is how many months away, that you're out of the business. So you spent all this time saying how Entergy is going to be so involved, but I don't see where their involvement is unless Holtec, you can't transfer the license to Holtec. So I'm really confused about that. And then I'd like to ask you, because there have been a lot of questions about Holtec, if you would, our federal representatives, many of them are on right now, have requested a public hearing locally for the public to be able to comment about this transfer of the license. The September meeting with the NRC did not do that. That was more about safety and how the operations were. But would you be asking the NRC to allow us to have a local meeting with local input on the transfer? But, so there are two questions. I don't understand all the things you were saying when you're going to walk away.
Well, I apologize for the confusion, but I speak really for Entergy and the fact that these are our plans going forward. And at this point, whether or not we have a sale to Holtec is very much up to approvals by NRC and by the state of New York. So I wanted to talk in the context of what Entergy's plans would be going into the future. Obviously, if we sell the plant, those would change. But I know that Holtec has said to this panel in a presentation earlier this year, they intend to have the same engagement. But what Entergy has done in the past to stay in contact with the local community, with the state, and with the federal regulators, and we're going to continue to do that for every day that we own this plant. In regards to, hearings, we're going to follow the NRC process. I had mentioned earlier in my response to the supervisor that the NRC has experience going through and reviewing these applications. They have been in the past asked to take into consideration opinions and intervention by other groups and have addressed those. So I would expect they would do the same here in New York.
Well, at this moment, we are not aware that they're going to do that. But would you, as a company, if people are asking for that, to urge the NRC to have this public dialogue?
We certainly make the NRC aware of what's going on locally. And, I don't think we have a lot of influence except to ensure that they're hearing public comments. I know they take the comments they received during the end of cycle meeting very, very seriously. And they have at the other sites as well. So I have confidence that the NRC will do a thorough job of evaluating the application to transfer the license and make the right decision in the end. And it's an open process. It allows for intervention before the commission. And I think that's what everybody's looking for.
Oh, okay, Sandy, you're finished. I'm sorry. Okay, let's see. Who is next on our panel that would like to speak? Sorry. Amanda Jo, did you hit the? Yeah, I think you did. I'm sorry, I'm having problems with my little hand thing. Amanda Jo, would you like to speak next? Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I want to commend the presenter on a very clear presentation. And I do so in the context I mentioned earlier that I had reviewed the minutes from our meeting quite a while back. And I asked several questions of the gentleman from Holtec, Joe Delmar, and he was unable to answer them. And given your background and the clarity of your presentation, I wanted to repeat the questions, essentially raise these points because I think they're still very relevant. One of them was about how long the fuel would stay in the fuel pool, given the fact that there's quite a bit of high burnup fuel that's been in use at Indian Point. And most of the scientists that we're in communication with have concerns that that fuel could be moved too soon and still be very, very hot. So I wondered if, other than NRC guidelines, if Entergy had a sense of an appropriate time that high burnup fuel. There's a lot of other fuel that can be moved, in the cycle of 6 assemblies or 6 caskfuls per year. But how long should the high burnup fuel stay in the fuel pool before it's safe to move?
I can honestly say I'm not knowledgeable specific to high burnup fuel. I do know that the amount of time that the fuel has to cool in the spent fuel pool to meet regulations is a calculation based on the plant design and the type of fuel you have. So for a pressurized water reactor, that can range anywhere from 12 to 16, 18 months. I can tell you at Vermont Yankee, which was a boiling water reactor, we had to wait upwards of 16 months. At Pilgrim Station, it was a little bit less because of the type of fuel. It also depends on the technology that you're using for how you're storing your fuel in the casks. So the cask design are designed essentially to take a certain amount of energy. And so in that cask, you would put a mixture of older fuel that's been in the spent fuel for a longer period of time, and newer fuel. So the combination does not exceed the design thermal capacity of the cask. So it's kind of complicated. I'm not an expert at it. Certainly Holtec is, but each of those casks is loaded with a mixture of fuel based on its age and its energy content. But back to your first question, the period of time for cooling can range somewhere between a year and a half, and that calculation for Indian Point will be done before we're allowed to put any of the new fuel into casks.
Another question related to that, directly related, is concerns that the canister that goes inside the concrete cask will it be inspected? Is it able to be, if there's a problem, is it able to be, you mentioned that it's sealed. I know that in the more robust canisters that are in use in Germany and Europe and other places around the world, the lid is bolted, not sealed, so that if it was necessary, a repair could be done. And related to that, during decommissioning, well, I want to just say with the canisters that go into the concrete casts, there is some history of scraping, and that can compromise the integrity of these thin-walled canisters. So if you would address that, and then related to that, will there be an overpack? I know that dry cells are very expensive, but will there be an overpack available on site? There is none at Oyster Creek, and if there should be a problem, it would take several days to get one there. And I ask you these questions because I was not able to get any answers from Holtec.
Well, a lot of the questions that you asked really do go back to the cast designers. Starting with your first question, the Holtec system that we're using is an NRC licensed design. It's a very safe design. And as I mentioned in my presentation, Holtec has not had any failures. I can also tell you that there is technology, and it was recently used at Maine Yankee, that allows you to go inside of these canisters through the vents. They have vents that allow air to come in the bottom and exit out the top. And they have robotic devices that can now inspect between the inner canister and the outer overpack to see if there's any degradation going on. At this point, I think it's a pilot program, but certainly it's addressing the questions about long-term, how you can assure yourself that the inner canister is not degrading over time, despite the fact that its metallurgy is designed for a long life. Specific to the scraping, I'm not really aware exactly where that's coming from. I do know there was an issue at San Onofre out in California where a Holtec cask was being lowered into its overpack, and there was some scraping along the way because it apparently didn't go in straight. I only have parts of the details, but I can tell you that is a completely different system that was used in California. It's an underground system where we're an above ground system. I can also tell you, in addition to the inspections that are done at Holtec at the factory before they're shipped to the sites for use, we do our own inspections to make sure that the canisters are meeting our quality requirements. They meet the design requirements for what we purchased. So that will not change going forward because it's the way we do things in our business. We always have a second check. We always have a process for ensuring there was no damage during transportation. And prior to these casks being used in service, we do a very careful inspection. So I think that would address any issues that we might have found from other places. And I guess the last thing I'll say is we're what is known as a learning organization. So we hear about things that happen at other sites, and then we make sure that we change our process to address them at our sites. I can tell you at Vermont Yankee, we had heard about some things that were going on in California, and before we continued loading casks at that particular project, at that particular site, we stopped, made sure we learned what was happening, and then once we convinced ourselves we didn't have the same issues, we moved on with the loading campaign in Vermont. So hopefully that gives you a little background into how we do business, how we select the vendors that are licensed for this type of cask, and how important this is going forward. Because as you mentioned, it's going to be there for a while.
And I have one other related question. When I was talking about the overpack for my previous question, I wasn't talking about the concrete cask. I was talking about having an emergency, if there were a problem, if there was scraping, if there was some other need to put a damaged canister, is there an overpack on site during decommissioning that can accept a canister if there's a problem?
Not to my knowledge. As far as having one on site, I have heard presentations where that would be the solution for addressing, a potential issue. But again, to date, we haven't had one of those. But I would refer back to the designer and the manufacturer to find out what their plans are.
And my last question, I want to give other people a chance to have their questions answered. But there's a lot of concern in the community about the Algonquin pipeline. There was a risk assessment done, and community members have reached out and tried to get a definitive answer. There's going to be heavy equipment on site, and I know that many members of the community feel it would be a lot safer if the Algonquin pipeline that is running under the site were shut down. And that was one of the questions I asked last time and has come up again. There's absolutely no mention of it in the PDSAR. We have other questions and issues, but that particular question, I think, is one of the biggest concerns that the community has raised, is a high pressure pipeline under the decommissioning site.
Yeah, the only comments that I could make about that is recently the Inspector General had identified some concerns about the analysis that was done in the event that there was a need to shut the pipeline down because of a breach somewhere along the pipeline. Questioned the analysis that Entergy had done in support of our safety analysis. We went back and reevaluated, changed some assumptions to be more conservative, provided that information to the NRC. I believe, and Tony, please step in if I'm misstating this, they did a follow-up inspection, found the work that we had done to reanalyze that event to be acceptable. The other thing we'll mention is that the pipeline runs, I would say, adjacent to the plant. I don't think it's under any of the commodities or any of the areas that will be disrupted by decommissioning, but certainly needs to be recognized in the planning process.
Okay, and the last thing is not so much a question for you, but a comment for the panel, and that is concerns recently since we've met. Holtec is under charges of criminal investigation in New Jersey for providing false information to, I think, the New Jersey EDA, and also in the township of Lacey, where Oyster Creek is. The town asked that Holtec go through a proper planning process, and they went ahead and built their concrete pad and actually had to have an injunction and a stop work order, which they ignored. And finally, through the courts, that was put into place. I am very concerned about the transfer to Holtec with their history. And I think that's something that the panel should really look into. Thank you.
I would like to comment, Manna, the second pad that will be built will be done completely according to engineering specs on the Indian Point property. They are going through the proper process currently, and it will be built according to properly. Our engineer will be observing it. It will be done. In a professional and in a proper manner according to all engineering specs that are approved through the village and through our engineer.
Thank you.
Thank you. You had some good questions, Manna, but I think maybe what we need is one whole session that evolves around the spent fuel cast. So we can have someone come in and discuss that and you know, tell us how they're built and you know, everything, all the questions that we need. So somebody who is and Joe Lynch, you did a phenomenal job. I know that's not what you exactly do, it's the spent fuel cast, but your knowledge from all these years of doing this was, you know, much appreciated. But, you know, I guess one day we will set up a meeting in reference to the spent fuel cask, how they work, how they're manufactured, the whole thing. And then people, if they have other questions about that, would be great. Thank you.
That's a great idea, Teresa.
Yeah.
That is a good idea.
That'll be one of our subjects, one of our agendas. Who else on the panel has a question? Oh, Tom Carey, is that you? Yes, that's you.
Thank you, Teresa. I really want to thank you, Joe Lynch, for your professionalism. You seem very genuine with your answers, and I really appreciate that because, you know, I don't want to keep rehashing the issues with Holtec, but there is a lot of questions regarding Holtec. I won't get into every one of them. You know, the Attorney General is interested in Holtec. Several times they keep coming up. You know, our Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff, you know, asked about public hearings. I'd like to reiterate that and request some public hearings from Holtec. They seem to be always absent when we have these meetings, or they never get back to us with answers that we have. And I have several. I know they reached out to maybe only 2 or 3 of the building trades in regards to the decommissioning, and that was only because of national agreements. So it would be nice to of Holtec to come and speak to the entire building trades in regards to this decommissioning project. And I realize, Joe, you may not have all the answers, but I just wanted to go on record and request, as Assemblywoman Galiff had said, and request public hearings from Holtec. I think they need to come to the table. And as Mayor Knickerbocker stated earlier, you know, these Zoom conferences are very difficult because you really don't get that face-to-face interaction that we probably would need during these this process. So hopefully at some point in time we can do that, but if we have to do it in a Zoom conference, then so be it. But I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Lynch. You've done a great job.
Thanks, Tom, for your comments, and I've noted them, and obviously we are in touch with Holtec, and I'll pass those along.
Yeah, I just want to add, this is Linda, I just want to add what Manna was saying. Our last panel meeting that we had, it was in the Village of Buchanan Hall, and I think it was January, right, Teresa?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so there was only one representative of Holtec present. I think he was new to the company, and he really didn't have answers to all of the important questions that were asked, including Manna's, if I remember. So we need them to come back and answer the questions.
Maybe at the next meeting we can invite them. I know it was, the last meeting was just a presentation of the PSDAR. So there was only one person there that was presenting that. So maybe going forward before we have that meeting, you know, for the questions that we want to have answered, maybe this panel can think of the questions ahead of time so that they have the proper people there to answer those questions.
That's a good idea, yeah.
So if we can, you know, do that in advance, I think that would be great.
And we could send the questions to you, Teresa, and then you could convey it to them.
Yeah, sure. And then this way, at least they would have the proper people that could respond to our questions from the company that are versed in those things. For example, the spent fuel cast, you know, somebody who that's what they do. That's, you know, they're experts in that field.
Right.
Do any of the other panel members, does anybody have any questions or comments? Because what we're going to do, we are going to turn it over then for public comment. Marcus, could you help us with that, how the public can get in to ask questions or make comments? And before that happens, I just want to say to everyone, as always, let's remain civil to one another, because when we do that, the conversation flows better and we get the information that we need, because there's a lot of information we need now, and there's we need to be able to discuss it in a civil manner. Marcus?
Sure, Teresa. What I'm going to do is anybody that's on the attendee list can raise their hand who's on a computer or iPad or iPhone. Anybody that's on the phone, they have to hit *9 to raise their hand, and then *6 to mute and unmute. So at this point, it's open for anybody to raise their hand who's on the computer. Anybody on the phone, please hit *9 to raise their hand. Teresa, you should be able to see anybody who raises their hand, and you can call them, and I can unmute them to speak.
Okay, and then also I want to mention for anyone, it's a 3-minute limit per speaker. That's what we have in our bylaws here.
And I have the timer for that too. So whenever somebody speaks, I'll run the timer.
Mark is very prepared. Very prepared. I like it.
Teresa, better you than me, Marcus.
Can I make a comment, Teresa?
Sure, absolutely.
You know, I'm listening to the presentations, which I agree were quite excellent tonight. I was very happy with them compared to back in January. It was very knowledgeable today. But I'm trying to get to the heart of what's been troubling me since the start of this. And that is, the decommissioning is based on a lot of trust for this community. Trust for Entergy, trust for Holtec, trust for the NRC. And although I have no reason to be suspect or that anything isn't going to be done 100% kosher and correctly, I don't feel reassured. There's a certain deep down questioning whether financial considerations, time considerations, availability of equipment and expertise may subvert what should be the correct way of proceeding. And I guess what I'm getting to is that in my industry, I'm a physician, work at a hospital. The hospital is regulated by Medicare and other government agencies, but every hospital has to also hire at its expense an independent agency. The Joint Commission comes in to monitor quality. The Joint Commission comes in to monitor quality, independent of government agencies and independent of the hospital itself, just to make sure that the hospital and everyone is doing the right thing. And I think that's what's missing in this process. The hiring of an independent agency that's experienced in decommissioning that could be telling us this is being done correctly, or issues that come up are being handled correctly. And again, that's not a knock against Holtec or Entergy or anyone, because I have no information yet of anything not being done 100% perfectly. But I do have that insecurity, and there's only one chance to get this right. And one thing that goes wrong would be catastrophic to this community forever. And I just think that maybe as a board, we should be looking into an independent agency to protect our rights and to advise us. Just a thought for people to ruminate on.
Okay, Richard, thank you. Good comments. I think we want to put a scientist on this panel, right, Teresa? You had mentioned that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be.
I don't know if the other facilities have had an independent agency overseeing other than, well, the NRC is not, it's a government agency. I know you're regulated by them and they continue to observe, but I don't know if other communities have had, whether it's, I don't know, the Attorney General's office or anything in other communities. I think that's what the question is.
Yeah, something to look into. Maybe I'll look into it and see if I can find anything out and report back.
Yeah, I think this this new member that we're going to get applications from to interview Teresa could help us in this regard, to Richard's point, to Richard's questions. Mm-hmm. At least as a start, Richard.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Okay.
So Teresa, we're still waiting. I do not see anybody raising their hand or putting anything in the chat box at this point. So I'm asking again, anybody has any questions, please raise their hand or hit *9, please. Thank you.
While we're waiting, one of the other things on the agenda, I just want to mention, the next meeting, we're going to schedule tentatively for January 7th. And let's see if Holtec will be available.
Yeah.
And I will ask them if they are available to attend, and that they will be on our next agenda. But
let's see if they can answer the dry cask storage questions too, Teresa, you know.
I know those are very important for the community, absolutely, because we don't know how long that's going to be stored there on the pad. Hopefully,
yeah, that's another question.
So to that point, Teresa, I know we always talk about this, and there's not really a lot of experience yet about what happens to dry cask storage over the course of decades and decades. But that is something that I am curious about from the manufacturer, about what is their long-term expectation of how these will perform, and what's the plan for seeing if something has gone awry. That's a question I don't think we've ever really heard the answer to.
Absolutely, Catherine. Mr. Lynch had mentioned, you know, that they will be moved in the future to another storage facility. I don't think in my lifetime they're ever going to Yucca Mountain.
No.
I'm not making light of it, but it's Yucca Mountain's been discussed for decades and decades, as we all know. So that would be a question for Holtec. Do they anticipate and when moving these dry cask fuel rods, you know, because of the isotopes, the radioactivity, going back to my science days, you know. So we have a lot of questions, don't we?
Yes, we do. So those are good questions, and we need answers to those. And I see someone's hand raised here. Marcus, I'm having a tough time. It's not a panelist.
No problem. I'm just unmuting him right now.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus. Thank you, Mayor Knickerbocker. It's Jim Creighton, one of the town board members in the town of Cortland.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. Just a quick question to follow up on something we met this morning at the Chamber of Commerce meeting. Could you just describe for the panel the current limits that you're expected to be cleaning up the property under decommissioning, and how that might be increased through negotiations with the state of New York, either through the Attorney General or someone else? Like, will it be available for use as a park or for residential use or something else?
Yeah, that was the DL English report I asked Jim before. Mr. Lynch, can you answer Jim's question for him?
I can say that the NRC cleanup standards for radiological decommissioning is 25 millirem per year for a member of the public that would live on the site after decommissioning is completed. The NRC has a process that you have to follow to ensure that all pathways, meaning if you drink groundwater, if you utilize the soil, if you're just living on the property, all of those pathways combined cannot exceed a total dose to a member of the public of 25 millirem per year. I'm not aware if the state of New York is seeking something more conservative. That's just not something that's within my knowledge base right now, but that is the federal standard, the minimum federal standard for a site that you would like to have unrestricted reuse.
Could you describe the I guess the standard that was negotiated in Massachusetts under the Pilgrim Agreement? And I think you mentioned the AG's office in New York might be the appropriate agency to negotiate that.
I can speak to the fact that Yankee Row, which is a site that was under my direction for cleanup, we cleaned that site up to a 10 millirem standard. So we went from the 25 required by the US NRC to a 10 millirem standard. And the reason for that is because the Massachusetts Department of Health already had that standard in their regulations for a site that was licensed, state licensed to operate in Massachusetts, of which Yankee Row was. So Yankee Row is a 10 milligram standard. We, of course, sold Pilgrim to Holtec. I believe that in the agreement that they have with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Holtec is going to clean up to a similar standard at Pilgrim, but I'd want them to confirm exactly what they agreed to in Massachusetts.
Thank you. I'd love for you to be able to clean up to that level here in Cortland as well, but we'll talk about that later. Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Thanks, Jim. I think what I remember now, Con Edison bought the property in 1955. Unit 1 went online in 62. So I was just a very, very, very little girl at that point. But I think the original agreement was that the property would be returned back to a quote unquote park-like area, because it was a park before Con Edison came in. So I don't know if, I don't know where I would, I'd have to check the village, whatever agreements to see what was agreed upon at that time. But my understanding is that's what Entergy or Con Edison at the time was supposed to return the whole area to a park-like facility. So not with the park, not with the pool or anything, but it would just be back to natural state. I don't know. So, all right. Any other questions? There's no callers really coming in. So I think you explained everything so good, Joe, that there were no further questions. That's great. And like I said, we're looking to schedule a meeting for January 7th. I will see once again if Holtec is available. If you have any questions, please forward them to me so we can have the proper people and experts on the meeting. Once again, I'd like to congratulate Kevin Byrne and Sandy Galiff on their reelection. And I'd like to really thank all of you for your time and your dedication. This is very important to our communities. And this is important that we get the information out that we're compiling here to the community, because as I'm out and about, there's always people asking me questions about the decommissioning, and you know, this is good now that it's on Zoom, I guess, because it's easier for the public to access it because it's being taped also, so they'll be able to look at that. But thank you, Joe Lynch.
That's
great
why
presentation.
I want to reiterate how important it is that this be a local group.
Yeah.
This
is about our community,
Yeah.
you know, so we need to be involved and we need to stay on top of things and we need to ask questions.
Good meeting, Teresa. Thank you.
Mayor Sandy Galoff has her hand up.
Oh, Sandy, sure.
I do, because I think having a meeting in January is too late.
Okay.
Holtec, I mean, we heard actually at an NRC meeting in September 22nd or whatever it was, somebody said they're going to be approved. But the deadline for approval, I think, is December. So to have them come in and ask some of these questions before the approval seems like we should do something before that. That's, you know, either the end of November, the first week in December, to have a meeting, have Holtec come with the questions.
Let's find that out, Sandy, because I talked to some of the NRC people a couple weeks ago, and they said because of the pandemic, they may move that up to later, maybe the first quarter of 2021. So Teresa, let's find that out.
Oh, yes.
Right. And if not, I think we should do it prior to that, not after the fact.
That's a good point.
Let me see when I can schedule that then. Definitely.
Okay.
May I make an announcement before we?
Sure, Manager.
Thank you very much. We have 2 educational events. Many of you have attended our previous events, including at the library in Montrose and so forth. We have one coming up on November 13th. Of course, it'll be virtual. It's a congressional briefing, and I'll be sending that information around to everyone on the panel this evening, but I wanted to call it to your attention. It's in the afternoon from 10 2 to 3 or 3:30. And then a regional one that focuses on Indian Point and decommissioning of Indian Point. And it's an update from last year's, what has changed over the year. And I'll be calling on some of you to help with that. And that will be on tentatively scheduled for November 20th. So 2 educational events coming up. Watch for those, and hopefully they'll shed some light on some of the questions that have come up tonight and previously.
Manna, you're going to send that information to us so we can copy, we can post it on our website for you? Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Great.
Anyone else?
Okay,
Oh, Sandy, sure. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm back
promise
again.
I'll work on this, Sandy. I promise.
Should have coordinated all this, but I wanted to let you know, because people have asked about this. There were 3 bills passed, like June 10th or whatever, dealing with Indian Point, both in the Senate with Senator Harkin and in the Assembly with myself. And they have not gone to the governor yet for his either approval or disapproval. But I would encourage you to reach out to the governor's staff. One is Assembly Bill 10398, which is about the spent fuel. And what it does is when they cease operations at Indian Point, then the spent fuel pools and the dry casts would be assessed, and there would be money coming back to the community for taxes until they are removed to Yucca Mountain or wherever they're removed to. And the other is Assembly 10338, which is about employees, making sure that they do get prevailing wage. If they are hired, we want them to be hired. And also to encourage, well, to require Holtec or whoever is coming in to employ the people that have been at Indian Point over these years, if they have the capabilities to continue in that role. So we wanted to protect those people that Mr. Lynch has talked about that are still going to be in the area. And then the other is Assembly Bill 10107, which is a tax exemption, and that's all about allowing the communities to have a pilot with a formally generated nuclear power plant, because right now the bill that was passed many years ago was just for a power plant that was in operation. So so the communities can always go forward with a pilot. I think you have something going on right now, Teresa, I'm not sure, but what Holtec will do or not do, we want to be sure in the law it protects you to get a pilot. So those are 3 bills. If anybody, if anybody wants to call my office, 914-941-1111 with more particulars, they can. So thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Sandy. And could you please keep us in the loop, because we have been watching to see if there's any movement with those bills. I guess the governor has to call for them first. And then, so what we'd like to do, we don't want to do anything ahead of time, because if we do that now, if we get the community to call, email, send letters, whatever it is to get his attention, if we do it now and it isn't called for until like 2 months from now, then it's like, well, that was a couple months ago. So we kind of want to know when there's movement, so then people can respond and do what they need to do. Because we had that huge petition that we did for the community.
I would say we should do it now, because often the governor, he's got to do something by the end of the year. And you don't want to get mixed up into the holidays. So I think you want to start the effort. And what I can do is provide you, Teresa, with, or you've got the number of bills, and you've got this huge network that you can reach out and have them all email the governor with their support for the legislation. If you support 3, fine, that's great. If you support 1, work on that one.
Okay.
Sandy, you and Senator Harkin, you've been working on these for us, which we truly appreciate. And when did you pass it? In June, you said?
In June, but the governor, we pass all of our bills.
Yeah. Well, why does it take so long for the governor to reach out, knowing that this is so important to us? I'm asking rhetorically.
Good question.
I'm hoping that some of the people from the State Public Service Commission that are on this call might encourage the governor to reach out and say, we want these, we want to get these bills done, and let's get it done quickly. He does it in his own pattern, in his own way of doing it.
Sandy, you're the messenger, and we appreciate you passing the bills, for heaven's sake. So, Tom Congdon, that's the question for you. Please go back to the governor.
We'll certainly let the governor's counsel's office know of the interest in these bills.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, so if there are no other comments or questions, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Agreed.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.